So Woodrow Wilson shows up in Paris in the spring of 1919 with a sort of a messianic complex of sorts. More people turned out to cheer Wilson and welcome Wilson than had ever turned out for any figure in history up until that point. And he brought with him to the Paris Peace Conference a kind of liberal program that was frankly trashed by his rival statesmen, Lloyd George in England and especially George Clemenceau of France. And instead of World War I being the war to end all wars, one historian called the Treaty of Versailles and the Paris Peace Conference the peace to end all peace. That's just how much the diplomatic aftermath of World War I kind of set up some of the long-term problems that would plague the rest of the century. So it's certainly not safe to say that liberalism won in World War I, but rather it rivaled an alternative set of ideologies that were ultimately discredited by that conflict. There were, however, new ideologies that came to the surface during the interwar period of 1919 to 1939. Marxism on the far left and fascism on the far right. And World War II was ultimately an ideological conflict to the extent that fascism under Hitler in particular, but also the Rome, Berlin, Tokyo Axis powers, fascism had become such a terrifying, enormous threat to literally the planet that the forces of liberalism and the forces of communism joined in the Allied crusade, the Allied cause, to stand up to Hitler. When you think of Hitler and Nazism, you can just think of a highly racialized Germanic version of fascism. So in 1949, the Allies prevailed over the Axis powers. Did I say 1949? I meant 1945. In 1945, fascism had been defeated. In the spring of 1945 with the defeat of Nazi Germany, the Battle of Berlin, and then in August and September of 1945 with the atomic bombs having been dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and the surrender of Japan to the Americans in that fall. After the ideological conflicts of the 20s and 30s and into the 40s, of course, at that point, the natural antagonism between the far left and the liberals, the conflict between communism and democratic capitalism, resurfaced during the Cold War. And with events like Sputnik and the Cuban Missile Crisis, you had what